want to talk about trauma and how you may not be able to get yourself to do the things you need to do, and you may know that, and you may witness yourself like, man, why can't I get myself to move forward? Why can't I get myself to take care of myself? Why can't I blah blah blah? And I'm not going to talk about habit building or anything like that. I'm going to talk specifically about psychology behind things and unlearning carceral perspectives in healing, right? So, first I want to say what I'm talking about specifically when I mention trauma is PTSD, complex PTSD, and the first thing I want to address is the notion that everybody's traumatized, right? Because that's a prominent notion now, and a lot of people are. Most people have some form of generational, systemic traumas, but not everybody has that full body somatic PTSD, and it does a huge disservice to a lot of people to push that narrative consistently. Also, part of that notion arises because the way in which we live for the most part now is incompatible with our biology. It's incompatible with the natural world, and also the alienation that in which most people live in, the loneliness, the hyper-individualism, which also can be a result of being traumatized, and it also makes it more likely for situations to traumatize you, right? Because when the human body is in a situation where its life is endangered, where it's threatened, where it has no power, right? If it has the systems to move through and expel that energy afterwards, if it has support to feel like it was not entirely powerless, it was not entirely in a hopeless, helpless position, then the individual will be less likely to go on to develop PTSD. But for the most part, any sort of institutions that would provide that for people, and not institutions, just any ways of living that would provide that for people, they no longer exist. Conditions in which we live make it so that everybody, well, not everybody, but majority of it's the perfect storm for unwellness, physically, mentally, spiritually. And a point I want to make specifically when I get onto the PTSD, complex PTSD, is that you cannot begin to release and move forward if you are still in the situation and in the position that led to you feeling that loss of autonomy, that helplessness, right? Because if you're still in that position and you're trying to mentally trick yourself, even if that's that's what your body will register it as, right? If you're still in a situation where you're threatened and you're telling yourself it's okay, we're healing, blah blah blah, while still in that situation, your body's gonna see it as just you gaslighting it, and that'll further the distance. I'm not saying that to make anyone feel hopeless, because it is very possible to move forward, but I just want to acknowledge that it takes a lot of endurance to get to the point where you're no longer in the position and placement of whatever it is and whatever situation it is that made you vulnerable, that made you feel that powerlessness, that invoked that loss of autonomy, that loss of self. I was in and out of psychiatric institutions, that there were a lot of patients who had abusive families and were in shitty situations, and they just had to go to family therapy, and they had to do these DBT exercises and SSRIs, and they had to try to get better in the same environment in which they, if you have a plant, right? If you have a plant in an ecosystem that's not compatible for it, and then you're trying to rehabilitate the plant in the same exact place that wasn't compatible, you're not going to be able to rehabilitate the plant. And that's the way also we want to look at things. We want to look at things through a lens of rehabilitation versus like carceral approaches to psychology, which is how psychology tends to function. It's how psychiatric institutions tend to function in a very carceral way, and that reflects in the way that most people speak about themselves, about their healing journeys and all that. And I'm here to say that you need to tear down those institutions meant to reinstate conformity and meant to further dissociate and disconnect you from your body, from the world around you, from others, in order to move forward in a way that isn't rooted in redemption. And you also weren't allowed to talk about, anything that could be controversial. You weren't allowed to talk about death in a room full of people who probably have attempted. It's just, I feel like, unproductive. What we need is honesty. Looking away from our collective shadow. You can't marry it either. It's all black and white, right? It's either we look away from the unconscious, from the collective shadow, or we marry it, and it's the only way we know. It's where we turn to for comfort, because at least it's real, right? At least it's real. So that's also one thing. If you can't get yourself to do the things you need to do, is it because it feels like lying? Is it because there's a dishonesty there, and you're still in some way, shape, or form in conditions that are not suitable for you? And that's not me saying cut everybody off, so that's collective trauma, things like that. But in individual cases of PTSD, complex PTSD, specifically if you're in a situation where there's a loss of autonomy, it feels like your body registers the experience as your life is at risk. There's nothing you can do. There's nobody willing to help you. You can't help yourself. Just a situation of complete helplessness, of complete powerlessness. Then and especially if it's reoccurring. So that's like complex PTSD specifically, which it's not in the DSM, but I like to also call it the bullshit book. So just because it's not in the DSM-5 doesn't mean it's not actually a thing. Your body, you might end up frequently in a dissociative state, right? So it's very hard to take care of yourself if you're in a dissociated state, because you do not think it's safe to be in your body, which is completely fair. And then, therefore, your body also does not think it is safe to speak. It does not think it has a say. Your body thinks it is still powerless. If we cannot process our own autonomy, then in situations where choice just will not be able to make an informed choice, one that considers us and our being, will not be able to make a choice rooted in our beliefs, rooted in our needs, rooted in what we know on a somatic level, because we will not know that is an option. If we do not recognize that we can become autonomous beings, and that's not just with thought. The whole idea that if you change your thoughts, you change your life, that's not how things work. Your body needs to believe it is autonomous. That starts with building and forging a mind-body connection. After high school, I took a gap year to really address things with myself, and I could not get myself to do anything for an entire year, pretty much. And that was 2020, so I really didn't have any, it was very easy to fall to nothing, because this was the first time in my life where I had complete stillness, and nothing but stillness. And I could not figure out what to do with it. I could not figure out what to do with the stillness, with myself, I found that there was nothing there. So there was nothing around me. There was nothing for me to morph into, nothing for me to reflect, to become, in order to get myself to operate as a person. I found that there was no center. And I found that without that center, there was no motivation, because there was no understanding that there was something that could or could not make decisions, and there was no understanding that there was autonomy. After going so long without having autonomy, like, especially with my experiences with medical malpractice as a child, I did not and could not find an innate comprehension of the fact that I could make choices for myself, that I could take care of myself because I had options, and that's something I could do, And it wasn't even mentally. Mentally, I could grasp things. It's just I couldn't somatically register choice. And it took a lot of time to really reinstate that enough of a connection with my body to start then doing things like breath work, exercise, the stuff they tell you to do. To not take care of yourself if you're not coming from a place of nourishment. So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to plant that seed of autonomy, and you need to plant that seed of wanting to nourish yourself, because without that, everything you do will be rooted in the notion of redemption, which the etymology of the word redemption actually means to buy back. So I think, it's perfect. I feel like on a subconscious level, most people, their healing, the things they work towards, it's coming from a place of redemption, of an attempt to buy themselves back, to buy their essence back, to reignite with their being, with their autonomy. With redemption will look differently depending on your particular situations, whether you're trying to redeem yourself through external accomplishments, being healthy, or redeem yourself through exercise, redeem yourself through things that aren't inherently bad, but you're approaching things from a place of desperation to recover what you've lost. And it's really hard not to approach things that way, and it's really hard also, as you move forward in certain ways, to not attach to the improvements you see in yourself. That's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm realizing how attached I've become to my growth. I'm afraid that I will lose myself again, that I will lose that center, that I will lose the autonomy as well. And so that's really hard, but it's easier if you have that foundation of wanting to nourish yourself. I got to that point is by recognizing my body as the one true thing I have on this earth, right? And it is the tool I have to connect with everything else, right? It is the tool I have. I'm looking at water right now. It is the tool I have to be able to do that. It is the vessel that allows me to experience, even if a lot of that experience is marked with pain, because I have chronic pain. But it's the vessel that lets me feel that pain, but it also lets me feel that pleasure. It lets me think these thoughts. It lets me speak. Our body is our only means of comprehending it, really, and I consider your mind a part of the body. I feel like, the whole mind, body, spirit, disconnecting, it's all one, right? I was in the inpatient program, and I'm like, to my therapist, I'm like, I just need to reunite my mind, body, and spirit. They're all detached. I'm like, I could feel myself in fragments. All this stuff, I was a disaster, but I would take my baths and I would go head to toe, and I would speak to every part of my body in complete honesty. I wasn't affirming things that weren't true to what my body knew, because that would just further the disconnect, that would just further the dissociation. So I would go head to toe and I would speak to every inch of my body. And I have chronic pain, right? So I would thank my body, but I would express my anger. I would say, my back hurts, because my back hurts right now, so I feel, and I would say, but I understand that as my body, you are trying your best. You are not programmed to hurt me. We're birthed, right, into a body, and that body, biologically, it's, everything it does is well intended, even if it ends up incorrect, which is something that's really difficult for me, especially to train yourself when you have a disability, or let's say, or just various situations where your body will be weaponized against you, or feel like it's been weaponized against you, right? So, and a lot of situations of oppression and things like that. But I'm like, I understand you're doing your best, you're trying your best to help me, and although I am angry, although I am frustrated, it is okay that that you're hurting me in this way. It is okay. Just letting my body feel safe to come back to me, if that makes sense. It's like there's like a scared animal. Your body, it becomes a scared animal, and you have to speak to it as so in order to coax it out and make it feel safe with you. Let's say you're in a state of really bad, severe depression, and you can't get out of bed. It's okay. Tell yourself, tell your body, I understand that you are too afraid, or you are trying to protect me by staying still, because that is one of the main reasons why our body gets stuck, because it is afraid. We all know, it goes through the fight, flight, all that stuff, and then it's the freeze, and it stays there until it knows that it is safe to come out. Or if you're so dissociated that you can't tune into the feelings and sensations in your body, saying, acknowledging that, be I don't, thank you to my head, even though I cannot feel what is happening inside of it. Thank you. I appreciate you trying to protect me, but it is safe to reconnect. It is safe to come back. One thing I've started to do recently is I wrote myself a letter. That's something if you have moments of clarity, moments of moments where you're motivated, write yourself a letter for moments where you're not doing as well. In that letter, tell yourself the things you'll need to hear, and the things you need to do, because other people's advice, they're specific to them. You need to really connect with yourself, and I don't mean in a hyper-individualistic way. You need to connect to yourself in a way that you can then connect with others, connect with the natural world autonomously. But that's another thing. Connection, it really helps reinstate that feeling of humanity, being near water, or near trees, or having a pet, or if you have friends and family that you feel connected to, even though we might wish to isolate, because it'll feel like a form of protection. If there's no center point, right? And if we can't identify our choices, we can't identify our personal autonomy, when we're around other people, we will dissolve. Isolation will feel safer because our body will recognize that if we're not around people, we're not losing our grasp on ourselves. But we might still be, right? Because we might be treating ourselves and our well-being in a very carceral way. And so writing letters to yourself so you could So when certain thoughts do arise, it's a while to get to the point where you could respond in your head, right? So you have to speak to yourself. Sometimes, if I'm so far gone in anxiety, like I used to have panic attacks daily, I will text myself and I'll use the fragmentation to my advantage, and I will speak to myself and respond to myself back and forth through my multiple Instagram accounts. So writing a letter to yourself and telling yourself the things you know you need, the things you know you need to hear, that you need to affirm to yourself. Speaking to your body, telling it it's safe. So first thing in the morning, I turn and I look at it, and it's a letter telling myself that no matter what, if I wake up feeling bad, if it takes me a while to get out of bed, it is safe to be present in my body, in my external surroundings. It is safe to come out, and whether or not it fully integrates me into myself, or into a whole self, doesn't matter, because at least I am reminding myself and instating that, starting to plant the seeds, sow the seeds of that belief. Connection is an option. That connection is connection's not just an option, it is a right? If you exist, you have a right to connect with your body. You have a right to connect with your land in whatever way that takes. And the connection does involve responding to your surroundings. So when I say connect to your land, I don't mean colonizing your land. Understanding it and living in a symbiotic means alongside it. Being a symbiotic participant of the world around you. But the first thing you need to do is connect with your body. And that's really hard. It's understandable that you're not connected to your body, and that's what happens. We don't have anything in place. We don't have any means to properly help people after something happens. Because I've been in psychiatric institutions. I've seen the way they failed people. And most people don't have support systems that could help them in the way they. The point is, like that whole, the Mary Oliver poem, you do not have to walk on your hands and your knees. You just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. So let the soft animal of your body understand that it can be soft, that it can be, that it can, and retrieving that animal. Sometimes that animal, it may be sick. Sometimes that animal may be in poor condition, Sometimes that animal's disabled, and all animals are capable of being disabled. We have to understand that the animal is allowed to exist even if it is not up to standards of redemption, which is why we have to deconstruct the core attempt to redeem, right? Once you retrieve that animal, and you must make the choice, you must affirm to yourself you have the choice, and then make the choice every day to let that animal be. And you have to listen. You have to listen in whatever state the animal may take. And I'll talk about that another time, how I learned to listen to my disability and my pain, and ultimately let it become my teacher in a lot of ways. One of my greatest teachers, besides the tree I talked to. I hope this felt like a friendly chat. If we were friends, I wouldn't be making eye contact with you either, probably. And but